talent and talent mobility is something that's going to be increasing your conversation as we talk about the future of work. I think during COVID, people are talking more about portfolio careers, about having 1 or 2 or 3 clients that they're working for rather than just a single client. And companies, especially enterprise companies, are not really set up really well for that because they've invested a lot of money in these programs, like a graduate program, in a leadership development program, and in retention. So for them, it feels like it costs them money when people leave, actually, and go and choose to work for 2 or 3 clients. So actually, how do we fuse this world where people increasingly want mobility and flexibility and to have these portfolio careers versus this world that's really traditional and really incentivizes long-term tenures in companies? And is that friction now where we need to work it out? We haven't quite solved that problem yet.
The age of intelligent machines is here, but it's raising one urgent question. Who gets left behind and how do we make sure it isn't us? I'm Cien, and through my work in Launch Lemonade, I've seen how much is at stake. In The Machine and Us, we'll explore what it means to stay human in a world being rewritten by intelligent machines. Today's guest, Andy Ayim MBE, has spent his career challenging systems that weren't built for everyone, whether by backing underrepresented founders or transforming how global brands think about their culture. Andy, it's such an honor to have you here.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Really looking forward to this conversation. Every conversation with Shen's a good one, to be honest.
Oh, thanks. This is so cool, first and foremost. But, everyone in my world anyway knows who you are, knows your story inside and out. You've been a guest in many podcasts and events. So I have some different questions. You've always prioritized building cultures that center people. I was in your team. With everything you've done, angel investing, founding, transforming organizations, how has your approach to putting people first evolved in a world increasingly dominated by intelligent systems?
That's a great first question. I think I always like to remind people that the way any system works is that there's inputs, there's machine, and there's outputs. And humans are always critical on both sides of that. We provide the inputs into the system and we utilize the outputs out of the system. So we are still core in this world of AI to actually what goes into training this AI, for better or for worse, but also how we utilize what comes out of this system, right? The AI doesn't fear, the AI isn't happy, the AI isn't sad, the AI isn't emotional. Our differentiator is that we can do all of those things as humans. So we need to tap into that creativity we have and actually the more human-centered sides of us to utilize this as best as possible, but also to train it in a more responsible way so that actually we get the outputs that are representative of what we want as society. I think our biggest risk today actually as humanity is that we rely too much on the machine and we forget actually the uniqueness that we bring as humanity to solving problems that we face.
So hypothetically speaking, if we let ourselves rely on the machine, and hypothetically speaking, if the machine can now train itself, what happens to us and what should we do?
I grew up really a big fan of a range of music from like reggae to pop to hip hop to grime. I remember being a fan of so many different types of music. And actually, I'll give you an example from even my life. I remember when I went to see Kendrick Lamar when he had released a mixtape and it was really early at the Electric Ballroom in Camden. And it was an intimate, special experience with maybe 300 people present, right? Back in the 90s, when a music artist would release music, okay, they would make music from the sale of their CDs. They would make music from touring and merchandise. So there's numerous ways that emerging artist can monetize on this craft and this gift that they have in producing music. Nowadays, it's harder than ever to discover new music and for that emerging artist to make money because there's no longer those avenues of making money through selling CDs, right? They're relying on streams that don't actually make them much money, but also is a sea of a million different artists, so it's even harder to discover them than before. So we've lost actually that nostalgia and experience because these algorithms have taken over. And these music individuals have also lost the ability now to even monetize on their craft that they used to. So we look at it, even though on the surface we've made things so much more efficient by having streaming here as a technology, actually what we've lost in experience is what the trade-off is. And I think this is the way that we need to think now as algorithms are taking over. The trade-offs actually are in experience and what we experience as humans, right? The major thing now for us to consider is actually, do we understand the trade-offs of what we lose when we choose to make algorithms take over? And that's where I think we need to be responsible and have restrictions, because actually the impact it can have on experience can be really negative.
I love that, and I love that perspective. But what caught my attention was the clear relationship between monetizing and creating experiences, or expressing ourselves. So, I mean, there's so many things that we can talk about that, but I think that with the promise of AI, if it can produce more, if with these, if algorithms would dictate and influence what people consume, and obviously, as a direct impact on that, what people create and how much they can create. It's very interesting for me to think about, what if monetization and creativity didn't go hand in hand, which is an interesting thought. Anyway, my next question is, you've worked with people at all levels to transform cultures, including myself. What's the hardest mindset shift leaders need to make to keep people, not machines, at the part of progress?
I love that. I think we're leading in perhaps the most challenging times in humanity's history, because you suddenly have this landscape that's really complex, where geopolitical matters matter. And if you're a leader who doesn't say anything when it comes to Israel or Palestine, you're going to disenfranchise people. If you say something about it, you're going to disenfranchise people. We're also living in this era now where we have an intergenerational workforce, a workforce that now demands transparency, that demands inclusion, that demands sustainability and social impact from the people that they're working for. You're now also living in an era where people want flexibility, because we've gone through a pandemic and COVID, and it's introduced people to the flexibility they had during that period. And they don't want to let go of that, because they really enjoyed having that flexibility of hybrid work, remote work, work from home, and centering their lives around the things that matter to them, whether that's going to the gym, going for a walk, or taking your child to school. So now we're living in such a complex time when it comes to leaders, because these leaders were not trained on how to make decisions in this complexity, right? That's not covered in your management training, right? So they feel underprepared and underskilled, and they don't want to do the wrong things. And what leaders don't realize nowadays is that you don't need to have all the answers. What you do need to do is be there for your team, listen. And when I say be there, I mean be present, be truly present in the conversation, actively listen, play back what you've heard using that person's language. And don't end the conversation feeling like I need to solve your problem. End the conversation saying, I'm here to support you. How would you like to be supported? That subtle shift is a complete difference in experience for a colleague that has a manager that cares in that way. Because that manager is sharing that vulnerability and that openness, that I don't have all the answers, but I want to support you because I care about what you just shared with me. And that's what we need from leaders today. We don't need all the answers.
Leaders have to be more human, is I think what you're saying. What is interesting for me, though, especially for companies that you're working with now, the enterprise businesses, a lot of them are innovating with AI, and you hear stories about people's tasks and jobs being displaced. Values, or what's your advice for leaders navigating this space, with people fearing losing their jobs and their livelihoods?
I think we're in a really unique time whenever a new technology emerges, where actually leaders can act from a place of grace and be honest around the fact that we're exploring and experimenting. When you use language like that, it takes the weight off of it, because it's the truth. We don't really know the full capabilities that this thing has. We don't really know how it's going to impact jobs. We don't really know how it's going to impact products. We don't know how it's going to influence customer experience. But we want to explore and experiment, and we want to empower you and give you the tools so you can explore and experiment too. That kind of language and framing is so powerful and so different, because now it gives everyone a license and ownership and accountability in the organization to feel that they're empowered to utilize AI in the right ways, or to find out the right ways to utilize it to get their job done more efficiently. Maybe I can focus less on the tactical and more on the strategic now. Maybe actually this frees up budget so I can hire that strategic resource that I need. maybe creates jobs and opportunities because now actually these other pieces of work are handled really well when supplemented with AI. So I think there's a land of opportunity if we have the right perspective and frame the exploration and experimentation in the right way.
I would have loved to work with this leader, but unfortunately I haven't. So I guess the next question is, what's one, said that leaders should be more human, but is there one human value you've seen leaders compromise in their pursuit of automation or innovating? And how do we ensure AI doesn't repeat those mistakes?
Yeah, I think all companies that are public really adhere to something called shareholder value. Who are the people that have invested in the company, therefore own the company? And actually, how can I drive results over the next quarter to show them that we're growing profitably? Privately held companies have a similar kind of struggle. They have the pressure of venture capitalists who have invested in their companies, and therefore they need to grow at a certain rate in a certain period of time in order to achieve their growth targets. This pressure of growing makes leaders sometimes feel like I need to make a decision where growth is prioritized over people and it's profit over people rather than people over profits. The truth is that leaders need to accept that there is no profit or value if you don't care for these people. These people create all of the value. Even in utilizing AI, we still need people to utilize AI in the right ways for the right use cases in order for us to drive value. So we need to recognize, as Simon Sinek says, that we're playing infinite games. We need to look after our people so that our people can look after our business. And that's the right order to things, always, even when we're trying to grow.
Do you think companies who are letting go of people to grow at the cost of scale are making a mistake?
I think it's an age-old challenge where companies during boom times are growing, especially where capital is cheap, interest is low, it's easy to get capital, they're growing, and sometimes not forecasting that round the corner there may be a downturn where interest rate might go higher, the cost of capital is more expensive, and therefore it leads to job cuts. It was the same thing in the financial crash, right? It was the same thing a decade ago where companies had to downsize and cut costs and therefore cut people. Right? Like nowadays, I think what's different and interesting is that I think talent and talent mobility is something that's going to be increasing your conversation as we talk about the future of work. I think during COVID, people are talking more about portfolio careers, about having one or two or three clients that they're working for rather than just a single client. And companies, especially enterprise companies, are not really set up really well for that because they've invested a lot of money in these programs, like a graduate program, in a leadership development program, and in retention. So for them, it feels like it costs them money when people leave, actually, and go and choose to work for two or three clients. So actually, how do we fuse this world where people increasingly want mobility and flexibility and to have these portfolio careers versus this world that's really traditional and really incentivizes long-term tenures in companies? And is that friction now where we need to work it out? We haven't quite solved that problem yet.
How do we solve that problem?
I think companies are going to have to adopt to almost like a two-speed system and have almost like pipelines and ways of working to incentivize long-term tenures, but also that flexibility of having a bank of people actually that are a little bit more flexible. So they work with us, they have expertise, maybe some ex-employees actually, so they know the culture, they know how to work in our systems, but actually they're choosing to work with two or three clients, and that's okay, right? Like I used to work for YouTube, let's say, and my expert was in YouTube music. But actually, now that I've left YouTube, I want to consult with YouTube music 1 or 2 days a week. Actually, as a company, I still benefit from knowing that I invested in that individual. They know our systems and processes. They're one of our culture. They've got all the relationships. So it can be a win-win, right? And actually, rather than having a full-time staff, now I've got someone 2 or 3 days a week that's just as effective, right? So there is a world there for certain types of roles where those win-win scenarios can be met.
So we've talked about kind of like the leader's position in that scenario. And what about the employee? Like what should employees do right now where there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a boom in being able to either become an entrepreneur yourself, have side hustles, or have a portfolio career? What should employees do?
I think the number one thing that I'd encourage employees to do now is to invest in themselves. Really think about upskilling. Actually, what are the areas that you can upskill in and gain more mastery? Like, what is the craft that you want to be known for? Because that's the thing that's difficult to displace. if you're like the number one expert at, it could be anything you're marketing director and you're an expert at international marketing campaigns. You double down on that craft, you invest in yourself, you become really great at that thing because people will seek and it's always sought after people with that type of expertise. That's why there's a headhunter industry, right? Because headhunters are going for people that are masters of their craft to bring them into roles where their expertise is needed, right? So that's what to do in these type of times. How do you invest in yourself and invest in your capabilities? And the same is true for even when you're educating yourself around your knowledge gaps, right? So if AI is one of those knowledge gaps, you sign up to something like Launch Lemonade, you try and create a few AI tools, get practical experience by doing, right? And actually utilize these tools for better or for worse, right? And it can be small jobs from creating content to bigger jobs like creating a campaign, right? And the key is to think about these tools as an extension of yourself, right? But number one and central to my message is investing in yourself and just educating yourself where you have knowledge gaps.
I want to now talk about one of the things that I know that you're very passionate about, which is diversity and equality. With these systems and the noise around agents, like I think for me personally, I'm starting to be more focused on the human rather than me as a woman or as a woman of person of color. You've seen how systems often reinforce existing inequalities. Do you think we're at risk of repeating those patterns? And what will it take to truly break them?
We're already repeating those patterns. And what we need to do is we need to design for inclusion. And what I mean is that if I'm training ChatGPT or Gemini, I should be paying for contributors who are women in the Philippines to contribute to the learning of my platform whilst people in the West use it for free. Sorry, while people in the West should be paying for access. The reason is I should be restricting access to those knowledge bases that we already have got vast inputs from already. I don't need more white middle class men in here. I don't need more of Reddit in here. What I need is more of the diverse voices that are underrepresented, which is why I'm willing to pay for those voices to be represented in this system. So we need to be intentional in how we design these systems and even putting friction in certain places so that we're getting representative inputs to train this model to be the best that it can be. We should be incentivized when creating AI to make it as representative, as inclusive as possible, because that's how we solve the majority, if not all, of the world's problems, because we know that we've got representative voices within these tools, right? As soon as we have a narrow set of contributors, we've actually got a narrow set of solutions. We've got AI that can only think in a narrow set of ways because it's only been trained on a narrow set of brains and ideas. And that's the risk that we've already fallen into, but we need to actually fix going forward by really creating friction and designing for inclusion, intentionality when designing these products.
Is there anything that we can do to avoid that risk right now? Or is it just down to the government or these systems? Like, I don't want to put the onus on us.
Regulation. I don't think it's down to regulation. I think it's down to company management. Like if you're in a company that's creating these AI tools, like how you consciously gain inputs from all different sides of the world, from all different types of customers, so that it's representative of the audience that you want to serve. And that's the exam question that should be asked every time that you're prioritizing a feature, every time that you're researching a customer problem, every time that you're even hiring a team to work on this problem. You need to be thinking about representation in that way, because it directly impacts the bottom line. You're going to grow, generate more revenue when you're able to solve more problems in a more accurate way because the inputs are so rich from such a diverse spectrum of society.
Can you spell this out for me, Andy? I think I know what you're saying, but I think it's important to give ourselves potential scenarios of what can happen if we don't do this from a business perspective and also from our perspective, from everyday people perspective.
Let's think about some big issues that we need to solve in society, such as cancer. Cancer impacts all people. People who are from China, people who are from Kenya, people who are from Brazil. Now, how cancer reacts in different bodies is different genetically. So if I don't have inputs from Brazil, from Kenyan people, and from Chinese people, suddenly I'm actually only solving certain types of cancer in certain types of people. That is dangerous if I'm applying solutions that were designed and modeled across a white man and I'm trying to apply that to a woman in Brazil, that is actually dangerous and can have detrimental effects from a health perspective. That could be a matter of life or death. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about designing for inclusion, and why it's important to understand what are the sample sizes and the inputs that actually have trained this model that are going to then influence decisions that doctors are going to make on the front line when trying to solve these problems, health issues.
So true. I think that it's with the rate of how we're innovating right now, I think that it's going to be inevitable that there will be, inequalities and alienation that's going to come about. And you've been in this, let's say, metaphorical fight. You've always had a clear mission. Are you afraid, or is this something that we should be alarmed about?
See, one thing that I'll say cautious about is that business models incentivize behaviors. And when I saw the growth of social media, it was all based off a very simple business model. The business model was that we make money from advertising, and advertisers want to advertise with us because of the amount of attention that we have on our platforms. So therefore, we are now incentivized to get as people on our platforms as much as possible for as long as possible, because that is the business model that we're going after. That business model as a core business model has been detrimental to society, because now we've got teenagers hooked on social media who are more depressed than ever, who struggle to think critically, and some are even committing suicide because of what they're seeing on social media, because social media keeps on hooking them and engaging them and incentivizing them to keep staying on the platform. We've got a sleep-deprived nation who are addicted to social media and being on their phones, right? All because of the business model that incentivizes us to be on them as much as possible. Now, if the business models for all of these social media platforms was different, and they made money in different ways that were not about our attention and allowed us to be responsible of our usage and time on platforms, and it gave us helpful reminders and nudges that we've been on social media for 20 minutes, perhaps we should take a break and don't allow us to come back into the platform at least after a 10-minute break has been taken, right? If we're incentivizing the right ways to do the right behaviors, like the business model makes a huge difference on what we do as consumers. So my fear is that with the advent of AI, are we going to fall into the same trap? Like the business model is going to be something simple like ad driven, and therefore it's going to incentivize us again to spend as much time in the platform as possible. Fortunately, with what we've seen with the like of Gemini and OpenAI, has been like subscription based, you pay per month. But I don't know if that's going to generate enough of the income to, give it the cost of computing power to generate this AI for them not to introduce something like ads eventually.
As I was actively reflecting on what you were saying, which is incredible, and I think it hits home. When I was solutionizing, I was like, what can solve this problem? What can incentivize? Like, how can we make something effective to incentively get people out of this kind of like rabbit hole of addiction to our phones and social media? And I was like, oh, why don't we use AI? Like, can we do something with AI to help solve this problem? Because I just don't have, and maybe I'm pessimistic here, but, historically humans have not incentivized humans to do better, especially like when it comes to social media. Businesses have always incentivized people to consume. So yeah, quite an interesting thought. The next question I have is, in a time when change is driven more by algorithms than by people, how do we build cultures or businesses that will last longer than the next trend?
That's a good question. I think the key thing in business, and I think you would really adhere to this, is that it always needs to be rooted in and centrally focused on solving customer problems. Like, who is that individual that we're actually solving the problem for? And what are the stories of our customers that really encourage, motivate, and inspire us and drive us to keep on solving solutions for them? I think the more distance between us as a business and the customer, the more we end up solving our own problems or the ideas that we have, rather than rooting it in solving customer problems. And that's the people that the business is in service to is customers. So regardless of having shareholders or investors, actually you're creating value for customers, and they're the ones that are actually paying for these problems to be solved by using your solutions. So businesses, as long as they stay rooted in that truth, will be enduring and will last. Technologies will come and go and will always evolve, but businesses that sustain themselves, when I think of the likes of Microsoft, or everyday brands like a Coca-Cola, McDonald's, like they've been enduring because of that connection with the customer, regardless of how the world has evolved around them.
Historically, humans have measured how successful they are based on how smart they are and how much they produce, how much money they make. In a time where potentially machines could produce more than us and be more intelligent than us, what do you think will it mean to be human?
So it's a great topic, actually, because at the moment I've been spending a lot of time writing, speaking, and really reflecting on this concept of fulfillment. And fulfillment, by definition, for me, means being in a constant state of joy and satisfaction. Currently today, when people think about seeking out fulfillment, they think about two flawed routes. One is, I need to become an entrepreneur and be my own boss, and I have the autonomy and space to do what I want. But it's flawed because the majority of businesses that start fail. So people are actually really unfulfilled because they never really fulfill that potential of what they saw in their head as their idea of being successful. And the second is that people wait till they retire. And after they retire, then they suddenly live the life that they want. But I don't believe in living through hell to get to heaven. So I believe that the key to fixing this is creating work cultures where people can feel fulfilled at work. And the linchpins actually for work culture are your managers. People don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers. So if your manager is able to create a psychologically safe environment where you can feed your curiosity, feel connected to the people that you're working with, and feel like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself, you will wake up with a spring in your step, looking forward to work and feeling fulfilled in and outside of work. And I believe that's where we need to focus on, especially if AI creates more space for us to focus on the things that matter.
Are we still in control, or are we just watching as the rules of intelligence, power, and creativity are rewritten in real time? One thing is clear. The world isn't slowing down. AI is evolving faster than policy, faster than ethics, faster than most of us can even understand. And whether we like it or not, we are all part of this experiment. So here's the real question. Are you shaping the future, or is the future shaping you? This isn't just a podcast. If you're a builder, a skeptic, a thinker, or just someone who refuses to be left behind, subscribe today, because the game has already started. And if you're not in the conversation, you're already behind. See you next time on The Human and the Machine.